How do you cultivate not just break bread with the dead, but also do so in a way that's generous?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's so much to say about that. One of the people that I quote in unpacking that idea is a science blogger, actually, who talks about positive and negative selection. And her point is an interesting one. She says that, like, if you, for instance, if you are an admissions officer at a very elite, highly selective university, when you look at applications, you kind of get yourself into a frame of mind where you're looking for a reason to rule this person out. They may have, there may be 99 good things about them, but you're looking for the one bad thing. And then once you found that one bad thing, that you throw them out. And she talks about the ways in which that habit of negative selection is something which kind of infects our relationships with other people as well, and also our relationships with ideas or books, or we wait and wait and wait until we see the one thing that we disagree with, and then that's it, you're out. But when you practice negative selection, the problem with that is that you then become you become blind to forms of excellence or beauty or people who can contribute to your community in really wonderful ways, even if there may be something they get wrong. And I think that can be, especially in our highly politicized environment where our political fights are so intense, and we have these hot button issues, on which we simply cannot tolerate disagreement, and we just must walk away from that person. Well, one of the things that, when that happens, one of the things we're doing is losing the ability to persuade and to be persuaded. And communities don't survive very well when we lose the ability to persuade and to be persuaded. And so one of the reasons that I suggest reading works from the past is that it gives us kind of practice in dealing with people who are different than us. And the stakes are a little bit lower. If I'm reading a writer from the 18th century, that person is not going to vote in the next election. So I don't have to worry about that person choosing the wrong politician to vote for. That person has a wholly different set of concerns. And I get a kind of a chance not to practice just negative selection. Maybe that person says something that offends me. Well, okay, then I'll close the book and set it aside and think about it a while, and then I can come back to it later on and then balance that against the other things that writer says that might actually be wise and worth knowing. Living in a culture that you couldn't imagine living in, and nevertheless that person can speak right to your heart. That's an amazing thing when you think about it. And you're going to be thankful for that. You're not going to necessarily believe everything that person believes, but you're going to be thankful for the way that person can speak a word that's a true word for you. Well, if you can do that with somebody from 2,500 years ago, you can probably do it with your neighbor also. But you just have to get yourself into a calmer frame of mind to be able to do that. You've got to get yourself into a situation where you're not immediately reacting. Some years ago, I'm not on social media anymore, but when I was still on Twitter, I remember somebody said something that annoyed me, and I gave a snarky reply, and he gave an even snarkier reply coming back. And at a certain point in the conversation, I was at my computer, and I looked down at my hands on the keyboard, and they were shaking. I was so upset. I was shaking. And I thought, I've got to walk away from this. And I did. I just walked away from it. And from that point on, I really stopped getting into it with anybody on social media and immediately got off social media altogether. Yeah. And to one extent, I was ashamed of myself because I thought, you are a mature Christian man. You should not be, reacting this way. But everything about social media is designed to make us act that way. It is designed to push those buttons.
Right.
And I had to accept the fact that I did not have whatever it takes, whatever Christ-likeness or Christian formation it takes to be impervious to having those buttons pushed. So I stepped away from it. And I think that if I can step away from that sort of the immediate provocation of the moment and get myself into an environment where I'm reading and studying and thinking and engaging with people from the past, then I build different habits of mind.
Yeah.
And then when I come back to dealing with my neighbor, I'm better equipped with patience and kind-heartedness. And I'm willing to be long-suffering. It becomes possible for me to turn the other cheek. And so in that way, the regular encounters with the past can be a kind of a training for us. And I wrote this book. This book was written for a general audience. So I'm writing to my fellow citizens. I'm writing to my fellow Americans and to people of other English-speaking countries who will have gone through some of this. And I think it's going to make us better. I think breaking bread with the dead can make us better citizens, can make us better neighbors. But I also really do think that this has a lesson for our fellow Christians, that it can help to make us better Christians too. Mm. It is an instrument that God can use to heal us from some of the anger and the resentment and the fierceness with which we go about so much of our social media lives these days. And of course, now it's, I think, increasingly bleeding over into our everyday lives. Yeah. So I think I wrote this book for a general readership, and I'd love to have everybody read it. But I do think it has particular lessons for my fellow Christians also.